Hi, Blues
Well,
Matters
hello.
here again. We have Al Basile. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. Because we're Americans and Americans have trouble with pronunciations, we call it basil.
Basil. It's Basil.
Well, actually, it's Basile because it's Italian, but Americans have trouble with that. So we just rhyme it with hazel.
Where are you today?
I live in Rhode Island, which is almost as far east as the States gets. So I'm on the East Coast in New England.
Correct. Let's talk about your musical career. What made you want to be a musician in the first place?
Oh my. Well, originally, my parents were not musicians and they didn't even have very much music in the house, but they had a few 78, and I liked some swing era 78s, some Harry James and Benny Goodman. And so when I was a boy, my parents said that they would pay for me to have private lessons to learn an instrument, but that I should choose the instrument. And so I liked the Harry James record with Frank Sinatra singing All or Nothing at All on it. And so I chose the trumpet. I didn't know that later in my life I would also become a singer and that I would be really influenced by Sinatra because I was only 8. But I took lessons for 5 years and then I played for a long time in school bands and orchestras and things like that as a sort of reading classical trumpet player. I wasn't very good at it. And so I gave it up when I went to college. But then after I got out of college, I made friends, musician friends, like Duke Robillard and Scott Hamilton. And they encouraged me to pick up the horn again. So I did, and I started to learn how to improvise. And it turned out that's what really excited me. So ever since I started playing again, which was in 1971, I've just been doing it right on through.
What was it about the cornet that you wanted to play? Not a guitar or saxophone or something like that?
Well, it's funny that you ask because most people, when they ask the cornet question, say, why not a trumpet? And the answer to that is that the cornet has a mellower, rounder tone that really appealed to me. It's not as piercing. And it's more like the kind, I see my horn as an alternate voice, and it's more like the kind of voice that I felt was right for me. But the reason why I chose this trumpet / cornet, because I played trumpet when I was 8, was just that I liked Harry James. And at the time, I had not heard Louis Armstrong, who, of course, is my musical pole star. He's had the most profound influence on me of any musician, not just any trumpet player or brass player. But I hadn't heard him at that point. It was only a couple of years later when my parents took me to see him. This was in 1958. And right away, I forgot all about Harry James.
What was it about Louis Armstrong that you liked?
Well, again, I see the horn as a vocal thing, and that's definitely what he was all about. And his vocal phrasing and his horn phrasing are very, very intimately connected. And what I was exposed to at the time was a person who approached music the same way, whether he was singing or whether he was playing. And that really became my model because not all trumpet players sing, and obviously most singers don't play instruments, particularly brass instruments. So that was, he just impressed me in every way. And then later on, when I started to learn how to improvise and I understood the depth of what he was doing, I realized that I could spend my whole life studying just him, and I was never going to learn everything I could from just him. So I've learned from lots of people, but I've been learning from him for, 50, 60, almost 70 years.
And did you learn stagecraft from him, or how did that come about?
Well, that's funny because, of course, he's a great entertainer and he very obviously enjoys engaging with an audience. And that's something that also really hit me because if you ever saw me perform live, I like audiences. I like looking at them. I like talking to them. I like singing and playing to them. And as a poet, I'm the same way. I'm really because I'm also an actor as a playwright, I'm a good speaker of my own words. And I give quite a few poetry readings. In fact, I've been in front of more poetry audiences than music ones recently. And everybody gets the same thing out of it, which is that I'm happy to be there. I look them in the eye when I'm reading. Really, all of that comes from, I can trace it now back to Armstrong because the thing about him was, as difficult a life as he had, particularly coming up, he's not an artist that builds on misery. He radiates joy despite what he's been through. And that's a very profound thing. And there are very few artists that can do that. Most of them are so affected by the pain that they've had in their lives that they can't help but reflect it and transmit it. And somehow, God knows how he was able to do it, because I don't know anybody that's personally would have been strong enough to be that positive after a start in life that had so many negatives to it.
Right. And when did you get your first break on stage yourself?
Well, it's funny. When I started playing again, it was at first a private thing because, as I said, I was friends with Duke Robillard, who, of course, was leading Roomful of Blues at the time. This is in the early 70s. And Scott, who was leading rhythm and blues combos, heading more into the jazz styles that he eventually made his life's occupation. And Scott said to me, he used to have jam sessions at his house, and all the musicians would come by and they would play. And I would go, because I was friends with him, I would just listen. And after a while, he said, well, didn't you used to play an instrument? I said, yeah, I played the trumpet for 10 years, but I gave it up. He said, well, if you ever want to take it up again, you can play at these sessions at my house. And you can struggle, because everybody struggles at first, and nobody will mind. In other words, it was a safe place to struggle and be bad, because you're always bad when you start. And so I did that for a while, and I got a little bit better, and he heard me getting better. And Scott was playing in places locally in Providence. And one day he said, well, do you want to sit in and play with me? I'll rehearse with you ahead of time so that you can be comfortable. And I said, yeah, I'd love that. And so that's what we did. The first time I ever played in public was with him. Then Duke used to see us. And not long after that, the next year, he hired me to be in Roomful. So that's actually, those are the specific people responsible for getting me going. I can't thank them enough.
What kind of year was that?
Well, the first time I played in public with Scott was in 1972. And Duke hired me to be in Roomful. I was their first trumpet player in 1973. It's a long time.
Right. And what kind of places did you play then?
When I was just sitting in with Scott, we played in places in Providence. But Roomful at the time was traveling all around the Northeast. And when Duke hired me, we went all the way out to Ann Arbor and Chicago, and mostly New England, but we played New York City. So we were a real traveling band. We did close to 300 dates a year. So we were in the bus all the time. It was I had been in university and then in grad school as a writer, as a fiction writer and as a playwright and as a poet. But this was like a different kind of grad school, being in front of audiences almost every night. Traveling, we would learn songs on the bus on the way to gigs. It was an advanced education. And then, of course, it gave me a chance to be in front of audiences all the time. So that only magnified my enjoyment doing that.
So have you any stories you can tell from the bus?
Oh, my. I have all kinds of stories I could tell from my time in Roomful. A lot of them I've written a bunch of them as poems, and they're in my books. But one of the great stories was we were playing at a club called Sandy's in Beverly, Massachusetts, which was really a jazz club. And it was a long, thin club, and the entrance was all the way to the right. The bandstand was facing the crowd. So the entrance was all the way to the right. We couldn't see the entrance. But I was the last guy in the horn section. So I was actually closest to the door. And I happened to look across. We used to do swing tunes and all kinds of blues tunes, early rhythm and blues tunes. It so happened we were doing Count Basie's tune, Broadway. And I happened to look to my right, and the door opened, and Count Basie and his wife came in to the club.
Yeah?
Now, the reason that he came was that we were there backing up Helen Humes at the time. We did some dates with Helen Humes. And Helen had been the singer for the Basie band after Billie Holiday left. And so he came to see Helen, but of course we were the band. So he came in, and he and his wife went in the back part of the club where it was dark. So they didn't call any attention to themselves. But the manager came up to me because I was closest to the edge of the stage, and he said, "Basie's in the audience. Tell the band." And I said, "Yeah." And then I didn't tell the band. because we didn't need to know. It was enough that I knew. So we did the tune. We finished our set. We called Helen up. We did the set with her. We took our first break, and here comes Count Basie out of the shadows. And that's when they knew that he was there. And he came up and he said, "You guys are swinging. I got to have my management book us together so that you can open for me." And he did that. And while I was still in the band, we opened for him a couple of times,
Right.
which were great memories, because of course Basie was one of our idols that was still performing. A lot of the people we listened to were not really still performing in the 70s. We got to work with some great people who were all older, like Eddie Clean Ed Vincent, and after I left the band, I worked with Big Joe Turner, and we worked with a bunch of great R&B sax players like Red Prysock and Syl Austin, and people that had made instrumental hits in the early 50s playing R&B. But they were all later on in their careers, and a lot of the people that we loved were just no longer doing it. I mean, Armstrong was dead. Ellington was still out there, and we went to see Ellington a number of times. Those were great memories for me, because I'm, along with Armstrong, Ellington's my other big influence. But yeah, we were a throwback band. You know, the music that we were playing in the 70s was music that had been popular in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
And any stories about Count Basie? Did you meet and talk to him?
Yeah, I have a great story about Count Basie, but it's kind of personal, so I'm not going to tell it because it would sound like I was showing off. But he said some very nice things to me personally that kind of made my year.
And what's the best advice you've got from anyone in your career?
There was a lot of good advice. Maybe the best was just keep playing, listen to the tunes that you like, and play those tunes, and you'll sooner or later you'll learn how to play. And of course, the people that I played with, people like Duke and Scott, did not go to music school. They were self-taught. And most of the guys that I've played with since have been self-taught. And one of the great things about being self-taught is that you not only have to learn how to improvise, but you have to learn how to teach yourself to improvise. So in other words, you have to come up with a program of how you're going to learn. And everybody that does that in isolation has a little different process. And so as a result, everybody that goes through that comes out sounding individual. Whereas a lot of people that go to music school all play the same scales. They all study chords the same way. And when they take solos, they all play scale-based solos and play up and down and play as fast as they can. And they all sound alike, and none of them really have any personality. But I was very fortunate because the people that I was around, they couldn't tell me how to learn, but they had all done it. So I was encouraged to think that there was no reason why I couldn't do it too. I think that's really important. I think that people who are self-taught improvisers are in the minority nowadays, but I really value every one of them because every one of them is an individual.
And do you put that into your own learning of music as well?
Well, how do you ask that a different way?
Right. Are you self-taught?
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, sometimes I get people that ask me how to learn. I mean, I could tell them how I taught myself, but it's not really appropriate because there's nobody else that's me. So, for example, when I started out, because I had learned to read music at the age of 8, and I was in orchestras and bands reading music. But when the time came for me to learn how to improvise, I basically had to eliminate the impact in my mind of having to read notes off a page because there's no page. It's in your head. And the first time I ever played in public, when I played with Scott in 1972, actually, as I was playing, I could see a little staff in my head. And every note I played would appear on the staff. It was kind of like the Follow the Bouncing Ball shorts. If you ever saw the Mills Brothers, you would sing along with the Mills Brothers and the little bouncing ball would bounce to the lyrics. Except for me, a little light would come on for every note that I play. Well, I've spent almost 60 years trying to get that completely out of my head. Now I play off what I hear. I don't have to visualize it. That like slows you down. So I
Right.
wouldn't, that's just me. Somebody else that didn't learn to read wouldn't have had that problem. So they wouldn't have had to learn how to cope with that problem.
So when you're doing your jazz and you're improvising, is that easy or difficult for you?
It gets easier, but it's been 55 years. It
Yeah.
didn't start out easier. It started out harder, and it's been hard. It's always hard, but over time you learn and you develop more facility and you develop more freedom. And for me, and this is something that people that listen to the new record who know my older records will notice, is that my solos are much longer on the new record. They're generally twice as long. And the reason for that is that when COVID happened, I was in the house a lot, like the rest of us. And I just practiced more and my playing got better. So I wanted to do more of it on my record so that it would be clear, because I don't tour. So people don't get to see me play live very often. Sometimes I play live down in Tennessee because I have a partnership with a guy that owns a studio in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and we're a production team. And so working with him, I go down there and supervise recording sessions sometimes. And also sometimes I go down and I play in a club down there that we have several artists that we work with as producers. And they're not just blues. We've got a blues guy, but we've got a country guy, and we've got a bluegrass group and Americana. So as a producer over the last 2 or 3 years, I've gotten a lot of experience working very deeply and closely with my partner, he's the engineer. And then I work with the artists. I work with them on vocal production. I work with them on the music side. So then it was a natural thing when the time came for me to make my next record, because the last record that I made was a couple of years ago, was a retrospective of 25 years of my record company. I got an independent record company called Sweet Spot Records, and I had 20 albums on that label. And it was 25 years and 20 albums in 25 years. So I did a retrospective where I picked out my favorite songs. This is 2 years ago. And then my partner remastered everything, which was great. But this time, for this one, for Blues in Hand, we really worked very, very closely. And I really functioned in every way as the producers. Really, all of the decisions on this record with regard to the production are mine. It's kind of interesting to be in my position, because there was a day a year ago where I had an idea for a song and I wrote it in my head. And then I went to my little home studio and I did a little demo. Mm-hmm. When I make demos, I write the bass line, I write the horn parts, because I always use a horn section. And then I might just play the chords just very basically, because I'm not a keyboard person. And then I take those demos into the studio to work with the musicians that I have on my albums. And I've had a lot of the same people for like 10 albums. They really know me and how to work with me. And so I choose them. I work with them. We do the recordings. And then in the past, Duke would always produce me. He produced the first 18 albums. And so I would kind of watch what he did, but I didn't make any effort to learn what he was doing. But the last few records, now that I'm into production, I've learned a lot on that side, and I made all those. So it's weird, because there was a time when the song was just some idea that I got when I was walking around. And now it's a completely finished product that all these people have worked on, and I'm responsible for it on every level. I wrote the songs, I'm singing, I'm playing, I made the arrangements, I worked with the mix, I worked with the masters. So if you think it stinks, blame me.
I was just going to talk about some of the songs on the album. Your songwriting, what comes first, the lyrics or melody, or what is it?
Well, I've done it every way. So when I was in college, I actually wrote shows, musicals, and I had a partner who was a composer. And so I wrote the book and lyrics. And the first show we did, he wrote all the music, and then I had to write lyrics to his music. So I learned how to do that. Then the next year, I said, well, I'll fix him. And I wrote all the lyrics first, and he had to write to my lyrics. And then later, when I started learning how to write my own music, I developed a way that I work most of the time now, which is I'll usually get a lyric idea. It's often ends up the title to the song. but most of the time it's the hook. It's the thing that repeats. It's the thing that sums up what the song is about. Mostly that's the title, but not always. But so that'll be a kernel, that'll be a phrase, and I'll have a sense of the melody of that phrase. But then at the same time, I'll hear the rhythm that it goes over. And so then the rhythm carries me forward, and I write the rest of the melody and the lyric to that rhythm and to the form that the lyric suggests to me. So what really happens is that it all happens at once, but I'm giving you the real details of really, it's always a lyric phrase first, and then a rhythm, and then a melody, and then the harmony that goes with that melody, and then the arrangement. Because as I said, when I write the song, I also write the bass lines and I write the harmony, the horn parts. So when we go in the studio, my bass player has to play exactly the line that I wrote, and the horn players have to play exactly the parts that I wrote. But the guitarist and the keyboard guy, they get a chord chart and they're free to add what they add because I'm not a keyboard or a guitar player. They have better ideas than I would have. So it's interesting. There's still some freedom, even for the bass player. I'll say if it's not behind my vocal, you can vary that. You can vary that bass line. But basically, when I write a bass line and a vocal and the horn part, they're written to fit together. So it's like one answers the other. And so they have to play what I write or that wouldn't work.
And with the guitar, you've got Kid Andersen there, who's also a producer. So how does that marry?
Well, that's interesting because I got to know Kid when one of the years that I was nominated for a blues award in the horn category, I would go to Memphis whenever I was nominated because they would pay for the hotel.
Right.
So I would go to those. So I've been to a bunch of them. But anyway, at the Blues Awards, they have the dinner. It's a whole night of giving out the awards with performances in between, like you see on any other award show. And this particular year, Kid Andersen was leading the house band that was going to back up a number of people. So he got in touch with me because he was going to back up this soul singer, Willie Walker, great singer who's since passed. But he said, are you going to be coming to Memphis? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, would you be willing to be in the band to back up Willie because we need a horn section for his tunes? And I said, yeah, sure, I'd love to do that. So I did that and got to know Kid. Then over the last few records, because Duke has kind of cut back on his activity, I've kind of moved into asking Kid to do the guitar parts. Now, because he's a producer, that comes in very handy. He's on the West Coast. He's 3,000 miles away from me. But what we do is we record the rhythm section without the guitar and the horns, and I do the vocals. Or actually, I just did scratch vocals. And then we send everything out to Kid, and he dials it up in his studio, and he adds his guitar. And it's really seamless. I mean, you really wouldn't. You've heard the record. You wouldn't say these people are 3,000 miles and a month apart. But that's because Kid is great. But because he produces himself, it was very easy because his studio's in his home. So he just stayed home and did his parts.
And some of the songs, talk about All Your Lies. Where did that come from?
Well, a lot of the songs on this record are, blues songs in general, and my songs in general, often come out of my own experience. But I'm also a playwright. So I also write in characters. And so some of my songs are sung from the standpoint of characters who are not me, while others actually are reflections of something that I can sing because I can mean it. And All Your Lies is one of those songs that's based on my own experience. And so I'm addressing somebody who was an important part of my life until it turned out that everything that I was being told that was nothing but lies. So at least I got a song out of it, you know. But there are a lot of songs on this record because it's been a few years since I made a record. Like I said, I didn't put one out last year. The one year before that, there were no new songs on that one. So it's going back several years, and I just keep writing songs. So I had a whole bunch of songs to choose from, and I picked the ones that I like the best. And quite a few of the songs on this album are based on my own experiences because I've had some difficult experiences over the last few years. And there's nothing like a blues song for getting that off your chest.
Is that where Leave It All Behind came?
Pardon?
Is that where Leave It All Behind came?
Yeah,
Leave It
that's
All
one of them.
Behind You.
That's one of them. There's a bunch
talk about
of them.
that one.
Yeah, there's Leave It All Behind You is a good example. Blues is My Roommate is a good example. My Dearest Dream is a good example. And When You Lose Your Money is a good example. So,
Have you lost your money?
well, I don't want to get into the numbers, but let's just say I have the authority to write that and sing that song. And I wouldn't have written or sung it before a couple of years ago. So,
Right. Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
I'll let the song stand for itself. Yeah, all of the songs about various kinds of losses come from various kinds of losses. And yet, there are other songs that have different moods that are examples of me singing in a character. A song like, Well, Thank You, Fool is in a character in a situation. Good Friends that is me singing Good Friends, but that's just a true thing that anybody could sing, because I think it's true for everybody that we all need good friends. So yeah, there's different kinds of songs, like all my records, but the personal songs on this record cut a little bit deeper because some of my experiences have cut a little bit deeper recently. So I got some good songs, and it helps you as a singer, because I wouldn't sing a song about an experience that I never had. Not that kind of song. I wouldn't pretend to have gone through some kind of pain that I never went through. But if you go through it, you bought your license.
But there are people that can sing and sing a lie. You can say a lie, but you can't sing a lie.
Well, I mean, again, if you go back to my beginnings in musical theater, if you think about, actors lie as a profession. Mm-hmm. So I the people that I valued the most as singers were singing actors. Sinatra, Fred Astaire, those are the first people that I listened to. And then when I started to get into soul and rhythm and blues, it was like Sam Cooke and Ray Charles. And so then it kind of moved into a little different territory where you're mostly singing personal stuff. But it started out as characters, and I'm comfortable writing characters. For a long time, I didn't write plays. I started writing plays again 6 years ago. And so all those decades I was just writing, I would get my character Jones out writing a song from a particular person's viewpoint it would usually be a person that I knew that had gone through something.
So when you started to write these songs in the album, did you have some kind of idea as to it was maybe going to seem like a film or a play or a poem?
Well, okay, I got two answers to that. When I get ideas, they're very discrete. In other words, when I get a poem idea, I get the first line or the first phrase of a poem. That's not that different from the way I describe writing a song. But I know right away that this is a poem. When I get a song idea, I know right away that it's a song. So in that sense, they're like different compartments. Another way of looking at it is I'm wearing a different hat. Still me. There's things you can do in a song lyric that you can't do in a poem, and vice versa. My poetry would not work as song lyrics because it's designed for all the words to do all the work with nothing else helping them. I help them if I read it out loud, but it's the words. Whereas with the song, the lyric might give you the message, but the mood, the music sets the mood, and it needs that as a complement. It's like I see it. To me, a song walks on two legs. It's got to have both. So when I get an idea, it either presents itself to me one way or the other way, and it kind of works out. But then I started writing plays, and so now I write audio plays. So it's just sound. They're not staged. You don't see them. You don't see the actors. So you've got to do it all with your voice and with the environment that you create around the voice. And I have friends who are excellent actors, and we've done a play a year for the last 6 years. So that exercise is a different part of me. And I act in my own plays. So I get to do that. But then if I'm writing a song that's really a character song, sometimes it's great fun to do a character song. I wrote a song on my first album. It was based on something that my uncle used to do. When I was a little boy, I had an uncle that was like 21 years older than me, and he used to play with me. And I'd be running around, and he would like chase me, and then he'd pin me down on the ground, and he'd start hitting me, not hard, but he would be pinning me down and not letting me up. And so I would start complaining, and he would say, "Why are you crying? It doesn't hurt me at all." And so years later, I wrote this song called "It Doesn't Hurt Me at All." But what I did with it, I didn't write a song about an uncle and a little kid. I wrote a song about a man and a woman where the man is mistreating the woman and she is upset, but he doesn't care because he isn't being hurt. And so the dramatic situation is it's different from the way it happened to me, but it's exactly the way some men treat some women.
Okay.
And so I was able to sing that for two reasons. One, I had that memory of being a victim. And two, I knew that this was something that other men did. So I assumed the character of a jerk. And as any actor will tell you, it frees you up. It's fun to play somebody that you're not, or I hope I'm not.
When you are on stage, is your persona on stage different from being off stage?
Well, I like being on stage. And so in that sense, I'm always up. But there's different ways of being up. So like when I'm giving a poetry reading, I'm not jumping around. I'm not moving around. When I'm on stage, I move around. So there's one little difference. But also, I spend a lot of time by myself because I'm a writer / performer. So when I'm writing, I'm by myself. And so I'm still on and still positive, but it wouldn't show if you saw me writing. It would just look like me sitting there. So it all depends on whether there's an audience and what the mood calls for. But if there's an audience, I like to present something for them to see. I don't like to pretend that they don't see me. There's some people who can be on stage and behave like nobody's actually can see them. But I can't do that.
You want to be an entertainer.
Oh, yeah. Well, again, it goes back to Armstrong. And to me, there's no deeper art. No artist has been deeper than Armstrong, but he fooled you into thinking he was just having fun. And that's not a bad thing.
It's a very good thing. Yeah. It's quite an art.
Yeah.
And what's your take on blues then? What does blues mean to you as a person?
Okay, so I was thinking about this because I knew I would be talking to you, and I thought that was a question that you might ask because when I do interviews, often it's asked. And I would put it this way. So depending on who you talk to, blues is a form, a musical form, or it's a feeling. It's a mood. It's an expression of mood. And so the way I like to put it is, if you think of it as it's a form, it's like you build a house. So you got a foundation, you got the walls, the ceiling goes on top. That's not any different than saying, in a 12-bar form, these are the chord changes and the lyrics repeat the second line and then it rhymes with the third. That's form. But you can build a house. It's not a home until somebody's living there. What makes somebody live there is the human emotion that's brought to the form. And to me, that's where blues is a feeling, blues is a mood. That's the role that is played there. There's plenty. I mean, you can be insincere and still be, quote unquote, playing a blues, but that's not blues to me. You got to have both. In fact, there are people who have deep blues feeling that don't happen to perform over blues forms. And there are other kinds of deep feeling in other cultures, whether it's flamenco or, there are different terms in different cultures that refer to this kind of deep well of feeling that comes out of loneliness and pain and trials and difficulties and tribulations in ways that you try to cope with it. It's universal. Everybody is capable of the blues feeling, but not everybody's capable of expressing it in a musical form. So that's kind of where a house is not a home is my metaphor for it. You got to have the house, but you got to have somebody there.
No, definitely. I think you really said that very well, and it rhymes with your new album with a lot of the lyrics that are on that album, a lot of the songs, you've been there, and it's
Yeah,
a
I mean,
feeling,
they're
you know?
internal states.
Yeah.
They're internal states. Older by the Minute, for example, came from an encounter I had with a woman that I used to live with 40 years ago. And I hadn't seen her in a long time. And it's kind of, I have a different perspective than I had. So it's like the way they see the encounter and the way that you see the encounter might not match up. And so that's what the song is about. It's like, well, she might be interested in some kind of a starting something up again, but I'm beyond that. I moved on. And so that's where that song comes from. Although I don't usually tell the people that inspire songs like that they inspired them. Sometimes there are people that inspire songs that would be considered flattering to them if they heard them, and them I might admit it to.
All right. And what would you say, reflecting back in your career, to an 8-year-old Al with his trumpet? Is there anything you would change? Anything?
The only thing I would say, and it's ironic because my private teacher, my trumpet teacher, was a jazz trumpet player. He was a really good one, but we never talked about jazz. So if I could go back to 8-year-old me, I would say, tell Mr. Lupi, while he's teaching you how to read, to talk about this other thing they call making up your own thing. Because then I would have bypassed a lot of the barriers that I had to basically dismantle the barriers that being able to read put in my head. But there's a nice coda to that story, and that is that even though we never talked about jazz, my trumpet teacher lived to be 98 years old. And he also played the violin. And when he was very old, he no longer played the trumpet, but he still played the violin. And when he was 95, now he knew, even though I went away and when I started my career, he was a big fan of Scott Hamilton's, and he knew the band that I was in. And so he was very proud of the fact that I had gone in kind of in his direction without his pushing me there. But so he actually called me up when he was 95 and said, listen, I have a band that's going to play on a local access television show. Do you want to come and play with me? And so literally 50 years after he had taught me how to play, I got to be in a band and play with him. And our styles were completely compatible, even though he never talked to me at all about jazz styles. So that was just I did that once, and I did it the next year when he was 96. These are a couple of my great, great memories. And he was just so tickled to see that this kid that he had started at the age of 8 was standing next to him, and we were both playing a Duke Ellington song together, with a rhythm section behind us. He really enjoyed that, and I really enjoyed it. So that's what I would change. I would say, tell this guy that he's going to be interested in improvising, and don't make him wait till he's 23 years old to tell him. Tell him now.
Yeah. No, it's that connection with music, isn't it? It's just connection.
Yeah, it didn't have to be that way. I mean, it just so happened that the music I liked was the music that he actually played. And then I learned how to play. I never even heard him play. I heard a tape of him many, many years later. I didn't even know what he sounded like as a jazz player until I was in my 40s. It was like, wow, I like the way he plays. Why didn't this happen sooner? So that's all I would say.
And what about success? What does success mean to you?
Well, there's 2 levels. And I talk about this often as a poet, because in poetry, see, the thing about music is it's a collaboration, and you need other people, and you need to get along with other people, and you need what they bring that you can't provide yourself. And so that's a beautiful dynamic. But for poets, they usually do it all by themselves. And so I make a distinction between self-expression and communication. So in other words, as a poet, you can express yourself just by writing the poem down on the page. But if nobody ever reads it or ever hears you read it, there's no communication. Communication needs an audience. Self-expression doesn't. So I would say I have these various modes of self-expression, whether it's writing plays or writing songs or singing or writing poems, all of that. And then my performing side, that's also self-expression. But my performing side is always connected to an audience. So to me, it's very satisfying to have learned how to do all these things that I do to express myself. That's satisfying. But the satisfaction that I get from connecting with an audience is a different satisfaction. And for me, it's a deeper satisfaction because it invites other people in to my world. So people that are in their own little worlds, that's cool. They can do that. But if you get out of your own little world and share it with others, everybody's world gets bigger. So those are the two aspects that I would mention. But, if I didn't learn how to play and how to sing and how to write, I wouldn't be able to express myself. So I'm very happy that I did the work to do that. But I wouldn't be as happy if I couldn't connect with audiences because I really enjoy doing it. And every once in a while, somebody comes up and, you get applause is one kind of feedback, but every once in a while, somebody comes up and says, that meant something to me. Or I had a woman come up to me. I gave a poetry reading, and a woman came up to me. This is about 6 months ago, and said, that last poem that you read, may I have permission to read it at my wife's funeral or something like that? And he said, well, I bought your book. It's in the book. Do I have your permission to read it? And I said, I would be honored. I mean, what better response could you possibly get? He said, what you said it better than I could have said it.
Yeah.
Moments like that, those are like the most satisfying. And so in terms of success, those are the things that mean the most to me. I mean, it's nice to be recognized up to a point, but recognition depends on the taste of the judge too.
Yeah.
So if somebody says that they like what I do, I always say thanks. But then if they like something else that I can't stand, I would rather not know that because it makes me think maybe they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
In that case, the praise rings a little hollow. So I like to stay ignorant and blissful and just be grateful for all positive comments are welcome.
And what are your hopes and fears for the album?
Well, this isn't really a fear, but I would be disappointed if nobody noticed that the production values are different from all my other albums. There's a sound to this album that we got working together. I mean, everything is different. We used a different mixing equipment, different mastering equipment, up-to-date technologies, and we spent a lot of time on it. And I believe, and my partner believes, that there's a sound to this album that's different from all of my other ones. Not that I don't like all the other ones, but it's a different thing, and I like it. I like what we were able to get in terms of the tone of my cornet, because it's not easy to record a brass instrument solo. It can sound kind of metallic. It can sound kind of blatty, and that's not what I want. And so what we got was a sound that I recognize as the sound that I make when I play live in a room. And so I'm very proud of that. If nobody were to notice that, I would be a little disappointed. And I would hope that some people would notice that the writing is a little bit more personal or a little bit deeper in some respects, because I feel like I'm singing with a little different conviction because I'm singing about some topics that are a little bit different. But again, if those things didn't get noticed, I would still be very happy. Because I don't tour, hope that we've got a big radio campaign, and I'm really hoping that a lot of people will hear it, because they can't really go out and see me perform it. So between radio and all the streaming services, I mean, I'm tied into all of that stuff. There's a million ways to access the music. So I just hope that it finds an audience that appreciates what it actually is, because I don't think that you need to know the whole history of blues or trumpet playing or jazz singing, or you don't have to be a specialist. It's music. If you listen to it, it should speak for itself. You should be able to respond to it. But what I really work hard to do is to create something that if you put it on and it's just playing in the next room while you're making dinner, it's enjoyable. If you put it on and you're sitting in the room really listening carefully, it's enjoyable on another level. So what I like to say is like the closer you listen, the more you discover. And so not everybody is going to know that, but my hopes, the more people know that, the more successful I would feel. And I probably will never know how many people know that, but that's what I work so hard to create, is something that doesn't say, this is deep, get serious and listen to this. You don't have to be serious. Just put it on. You can dance to it. It's, again, I go all the way back to Armstrong. He doesn't say, what I'm about to play in this solo requires a lifetime's worth of knowledge of harmony and melody and playing the instrument. He doesn't tell you that. He just plays. So, and you can just dig it for what it is. But boy, when I started to learn what it takes to think up the stuff that he plays. When I first started, I was knocked out by what he played. I said, boy, his technical facility is amazing. Then later, when I started to learn how to make up my own stuff, I listened to other people and I said, well, okay, I understand how they do that. But how does he do what he's doing? And then I began slowly to understand that you can't do what he's doing unless you already know how to do all that other stuff. You got to know everything about harmony. You got to know everything about melody. You got to have a deep understanding of rhythm, his dramatic sense, his melodic sense, all of that. And then he does it in the most natural way, as if it took no effort at all. That's profound artistry. And so in my own way, that's what I'm trying to do, is to create something that is it's like stealth art. Yeah. You like the way it sounds, but then later on you go, wait a minute, he was saying something.
I think it's a good place to finish.
If you like, it's been very enjoyable.
What have you got to say to the Blues Matters public and your fans out there?
Yeah, well, a shout out to the Blues Matters public. Now, I must ask, so you're in Scotland, is that right?
I'm in Scotland, yeah.
You're in Scotland. Okay. There's a literary journal in Scotland that publishes my poetry sometimes. So I actually have a little bit of a footprint in Scotland.
Which one's that?
The Dark Horse.
Oh, I've
you
heard
could
of
look
that.
it up. They just had a big anniversary issue.
Right.
But it's the editor is a Scot, and I met him at poetry conferences here in the States because he came over. So actually, he's also a blues aficionado and plays harp. His name is Jerry Cambridge. Nice guy, excellent poet, and obviously an editor of impeccable taste.
Brilliant.
So that's my little connection to the land of your origin and current domicile.
Look at it. Oh, well.
Well, thanks a lot.